Have you guys ever seen a family destroy absolutely everything just to protect a golden child? Welcome back to the channel. We are dealing with $55,000, forged documents, and a level of entitlement that I cannot even wrap my head around. Let's get straight into it. I was never supposed to be the rich one in the family. That title belonged to my younger sister, Chloe, the golden child, the homecoming queen, the girl with the flawless GPA who made it into every top-tier university she ever applied to. I was just Arthur, 36, quiet, a little awkward around big groups, and significantly more comfortable reading quarterly financial reports than chatting about fashion trends or planning extravagant events. I work in private equity, but I promise you wouldn't know it from looking at me. I wear the same $75 watch I've had since my early 20s. I drive a rugged, 12-year-old Ford F-150 that has seen better days but runs like a dream. I live in a quiet, unassuming wooden house out in the suburbs. A house I renovated with my own two hands and paid off in cash 3 years ago. No debt, no drama, no burning desire to show off. That is probably exactly why no one in my family really understood what I actually do for a living, and honestly, I never bothered to correct them. They thought I worked in some boring, low-level finance job. My mom once confidently told her bridge club that I was a bank teller or a loan clerk or something along those lines. I just smiled and nodded. It was infinitely easier than trying to explain leveraged buyouts, silent partnerships, and offshore trust structures to people who only cared about surface-level success. Besides, it didn't matter. Chloe sucked up all the oxygen and attention in the room anyway. She always had. Even when we were kids, it was like I was the backup sibling, the spare part kept in the trunk just in case. She got the expensive piano lessons, the private ballet recitals, the elite tutoring. I got told to keep my voice down and be quiet during her practice sessions. If Chloe wanted something, the entire gravitational pull of our household shifted to ensure she got it. If I ever needed help with school, a broken heart, or life in general, I got a firm pat on the back and a generic, "You'll figure it out, Arthur. You always do." For most of my life, I wasn't bitter. I simply kept my head down, worked grueling 80-hour weeks, and made my peace with the glaring reality that my parents, especially my mother, saw Chloe as the bright, shining hope of the family lineage. They called her our little star, even when we were well into our 30s, and Chloe played the part of the star flawlessly. She was smiling, charming, fiercely manipulative, and always just helpless enough to desperately need rescuing by someone else's checkbook. The harsh truth is, behind the glittering aesthetic and the heavily curated Instagram filters, Chloe has absolutely no idea how to manage money, nurture genuine relationships, or handle the basic responsibilities of adulthood. She's burned through more dream jobs than I can count on both hands, bounced between luxury downtown apartments she could never actually afford, and dated a carousel of wealthy men who miraculously disappeared the exact second she brought up the word marriage. Her life was a house of cards, and I was perfectly fine letting her live in it, as long as she stayed out of mine. But families like mine don't let you stay on the sidelines forever. Eventually, they demand you pay the admission fee for their circus. To understand the depth of the fracture between us, you have to understand what happened 6 months before her wedding. It wasn't just a lifetime of mild neglect. It was a specific, calculated betrayal that severed whatever lingering fraternal loyalty I had left. It involved a car, but not just any car. It was a 1968 Ford Mustang. My grandfather and I had found the rusting, hollowed-out shell of it sitting in a barn when I was just out of college. For 5 agonizing, beautiful years we worked on that machine. We bled over the engine block, scoured junkyards for original parts, and breathed life back into a piece of American history. When my grandfather passed away, that car became more than steel and rubber. It was the last physical anchor I had to the only man in my family who ever looked at me like I was the main character. It was my pride, my sanctuary. 6 months ago, Chloe got engaged to Derek, a guy with expensive shoes and a desperate need to impress his country club friends. One weekend, while I was out of town closing a merger, I left my spare house keys with my parents for an emergency. Chloe, wanting to show off to Derek's groomsmen, convinced my mother to let her borrow the Mustang for a photo op. She didn't know how to handle the horsepower. She didn't respect the machine. She took a corner too fast on a wet suburban road, hopped a curb, and plowed the pristine, chrome-laden front end straight into a concrete retaining wall. Oh my word, the absolute audacity to take a classic car just for a photo op and destroy it. How are the parents going to justify this? What would you guys do if your sibling crashed your prized possession? When I got the call and rushed home, my heart stopped. The front of the Mustang was unrecognizable. A twisted, jagged mess of metal. But the real devastation didn't come from the crushed engine block. It came from my parents. Chloe was sobbing hysterically in the driveway, completely uninjured but putting on an Oscar-worthy performance of trauma. When I demanded that her insurance cover the catastrophic damage, my father physically stepped between us. "Arthur, stop it!" My dad had barked, his face flushed. "She's terrified. It was an accident. An accident she caused by stealing my car." I yelled back, my hands shaking. "She needs to pay for this. I'm calling the police to file a report for the insurance claim." My mother grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "You can't do that, Arthur. Do you know what a claim like that will do to her insurance premiums? It will destroy her credit score. She and Derek are trying to secure loans for the wedding venues. If her credit tanks, the wedding is ruined. You can't ruin your sister's future over a piece of metal." "A piece of metal?" I whispered, staring at them in disbelief. "It was Grandpa's. It was ours." "You make a good living, Arthur," my father had reasoned, using that heavy, authoritative tone that always made me feel like I was 8 years old again. "You can afford to fix it out of pocket. Be a man. Take the hit. Don't ruin her big day over your stubborn pride." They didn't ask. They demanded. They mandated my sacrifice to pave the way for her vanity. I looked at Chloe, who was peeking at me from behind her hands, not a single tear actually falling from her eyes. She knew she had won. She always won. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a punch. I silently walked over to the wreckage, grabbed the heavy canvas tarp from the garage, and draped it over the ruined face of the Mustang like a shroud. I swallowed a lump of bitter ash, paid the massive towing and storage fees out of pocket, and stopped answering their phone calls. That was the first true fracture. The moment I realized I wasn't a son or a brother. I was a shock absorber for Chloe's reckless life. The wedding planning naturally escalated into a financial bloodbath. Because when Chloe finally found a guy who proposed, and more importantly, could tolerate her long enough to actually stay, my entire family practically lost their collective minds with excitement. It was like Chloe had finally secured her happily ever after, and we were all expected to be enthusiastic extras in her fairy tale. About 2 months before the wedding, Chloe texted me, begging to meet for lunch. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at this trendy, absurdly overpriced cafe downtown, the kind of place that charges $18 for a single slice of avocado toast and employs baristas who look like they belong on the cover of a fashion magazine. I should have known something was horribly wrong when she eagerly offered to pay. Chloe never offers to pay for anything. She ordered some kind of extravagant, foam-heavy latte, looked at me with that highly practiced, sugary smile she always deployed when she wanted to extract a favor, and leaned forward. "So, I've been thinking about you," she purred. "You're doing really well for yourself, right?" I blinked, taking a slow sip of my black coffee. "I'm doing fine." "Yeah." "No, I mean really well," she insisted, her eyes gleaming with calculation. "Like, you have your own house. You never have any debt. You travel. You're probably just killing it with your little investments. Right?" I gave her a careful, guarded smile. "I live within my means, Chloe. That's all." She laughed, a bright, tinkling sound like I just said something incredibly adorable. "That's such a you thing to say. So humble." I waited. I already knew the pitch was coming. I just didn't know how catastrophic the ask would be. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice as if we were sharing classified state secrets. "So listen, I'm a little over budget on the wedding." "How much over budget?" "Just by a tiny bit," she said, waving her manicured hand. "Okay, more than a bit. 55,000, to be exact." $55,000? She says it like it is loose change for a cup of coffee. The entitlement here is just wild. Would any of you ever ask a sibling for that kind of cash after destroying their car? I nearly choked on my coffee. You're over budget by 55 grand? She waved it off again like it was loose change found in the couch cushions. It's really not that bad. We had to upgrade the catering to this amazing Michelin-starred chef because Derek's family are major foodies. And I found this exclusive designer in Milan who is custom-making the bridesmaid dresses. Trust me, Arthur. It's an entire vibe. Chloe, that's more than some people make in a year, I said, my voice hardening. But anyway, I was hoping you could help, she pressed on, completely ignoring reality. Help how? I asked, though the icy dread in my stomach already gave me the answer. She smiled. Sweet, radiant, and utterly poisonous. Cover the difference. Just the $55,000. I mean, it's absolutely nothing to someone like you, right? You probably made that in dividends last quarter alone. I sat back, genuinely stunned by the sheer audacity. You're asking me to give you $55,000? Not give, she corrected quickly, her eyes flashing. Just pay for the wedding. It's a one-time thing. You'd be making sure your only sister has the magical day of her dreams. And honestly, Arthur, it would mean so much to Mom and Dad. They're kind of maxed out on their credit cards. But we all know you're the one who's doing the best. I stared at her. This wasn't just a bad ask. It was an entitled, delusional demand. There was zero gratitude in her voice, no acknowledgement of how massive that number was, no remorse for the car she destroyed just months prior. She genuinely thought I'd just hand over my hard-earned money like I was a compliant ATM. I took a deep, steadying breath. Chloe, I love you, but I'm not funding a $55,000 wedding. That is absolutely not happening. Her smile faltered for exactly 1 second. Then, the venomous performance kicked right back in. Wow. Okay. I guess I'll just go tell Derek we have to cancel the signature cocktail bar and cut the live jazz band. Thanks for nothing, Arthur. I didn't say I wouldn't help at all, I offered carefully, trying to be the bigger person. But 55 grand? Come on, that's not remotely reasonable. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. She didn't even finish her expensive latte. Fine. Forget it. I'll figure it out myself. She grabbed her designer purse, looked down at me with an expression of pure disdain, and dropped a line that sent a chill down my spine. Just remember this when the time comes. With that cryptic, theatrical threat, she turned on her heel and walked out. I wish I could say I forgot about her ominous exit. I wish I could say I just chalked it up to Chloe being her usual dramatic self. But something about the cold, dead way she had delivered that line, that weird, deliberate emphasis on the time, gnawed at my gut. It was a threat poorly disguised as drama. And in my family, drama has a terrifying way of turning nuclear. Exactly 2 weeks later, my phone buzzed with a text from her. Dinner at my place. Just us. Super chill. Let's clear the air. Followed by a smiling emoji. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to decline. I knew I shouldn't go, but I was the older brother. I foolishly thought I could manage the situation. I went anyway. The moment I stepped through the door of her overpriced apartment, I knew I had made a fatal mistake. Because it wasn't just us. 3 men in sharp, tailored suits were already seated around her dining table. Each of them had a thick stack of legal paperwork neatly arranged in front of them. The air in the room was thick, sterile, and entirely hostile. Chloe sauntered out of the kitchen holding a crystal glass of red wine, wearing that exact same sweet, predatory smile she always used right before she lit someone's world on fire. She raised her glass toward me, her eyes dancing with malicious glee. Welcome, Arthur. Let's talk options. What the hell? This is not a family dinner. This is a literal ambush. She hired corporate mercenaries to extort her own brother. Have you guys ever experienced a betrayal this calculated from your own flesh and blood? I stood frozen in the doorway, my boots rooted to the hardwood floor. Something about this scene, 3 corporate lawyers arrayed like a firing squad, documents spread out like a hostile corporate takeover, and my sister smiling like she was hosting a casual Sunday brunch. Felt profoundly off. My gut tightened into a hard knot. This wasn't a super chill dinner to clear the air. This was a premeditated ambush, and I was the only casualty who hadn't received the memo. "You all right, Arthur?" Chloe asked sweetly, gesturing to the solitary empty chair positioned directly across from the legal team. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I didn't realize clearing the air now required outside legal counsel," I said, my voice deadpan. I did not move toward the chair. She laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Oh, stop being so dramatic. It's just a little paperwork. Go on, sit down. Do you want red or white?" "I'll take answers," I said flatly, keeping my voice dangerously low. That made her arrogant smile freeze for a fraction of a second. Just a quick flicker of irritation, but I caught it. The oldest and tallest of the 3 men stood up, buttoning his suit jacket, and extended a manicured hand. "Mr. Sterling, my name is Harrison Vance. I represent your sister and her fiancé in a matter of urgent financial arbitration." "Please," Harrison continued smoothly, gesturing to the documents. "If you'll just join us at the table, I can walk you through the situation and we can resolve this quietly." "There is no need," I said, crossing my arms over my chest. "My sister already walked me through her situation over coffee. She wants money." I said no. End of story. Harrison didn't flinch. He was clearly well paid to handle resistance. "Respectfully, sir, I believe you will absolutely want to see these documents." "And why exactly would that be?" I asked, my eyes narrowing. Chloe let out an exaggerated, theatrical sigh and took a long sip of her wine. "Because you made a promise, Arthur." "What promise?" I snapped. She turned to Harrison and lazily waved 2 fingers. "Show him the agreement." Harrison opened a premium leather folder and slid a few heavy, watermarked sheets of paper across the table toward me. Cautiously, I took a step forward and glanced down at the text. The bold heading at the top read, "Binding Pledge of Familial Contribution." It was formatted exactly like a high-level corporate contract, complete with my full legal name, my home address, and a digital signature that I had absolutely never seen in my life. I stared at the paperwork, my mind racing to process the sheer insanity of what I was looking at. "What is this garbage?" I demanded, my voice turning into a low growl. Chloe's voice dripped with syrupy sweetness. "It's the email you sent Mom 3 months ago, saying you'd be willing to help out with my wedding however you could. I just had it printed out, and my team added some necessary formatting for legal clarity. It's been officially notarized." My jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. "You printed out a polite, generic email and digitally altered it to look like a fake contract?" "Not fake," she snapped, suddenly dropping the cutesy, innocent act entirely. Her eyes turned hard and calculating. "It is legally persuasive, and if you don't agree to honor the financial commitment you made, my team is fully prepared to escalate this to civil court." I shook my head in utter disbelief, looking between the 3 men in suits. "Are you people serious right now? You are licensed attorneys." Harrison stepped in smoothly, attempting to play the reasonable mediator. "Mr. Sterling, we're not here to be adversarial. Our sole intention is to reach an amicable, out-of-court solution. Your sister has already made substantial, non-refundable financial commitments based entirely on the expectation of your pledged support. She's simply asking for follow-through." "She's asking for extortion," I fired back, my voice echoing in the dining room. "You don't get to take a vague, good-faith email and magically transform it into a legally binding $55,000 invoice." A second lawyer, a shorter man wiping his glasses, chimed in. "We are fully prepared to file a formal claim for promissory estoppel. This will include all potential damages, emotional distress, and financial losses if your sister is forced to downsize or cancel her vendors due to your sudden withdrawal of support." I turned my furious gaze back to Chloe. "You're seriously threatening me with a lawsuit over a wedding party?" She gave me a sickening, pitying look. You left me no choice, Arthur. This is my one special day. I'm not asking you to buy me a mansion. I just need your help, and you're acting like I'm some kind of criminal. No, Chloe, you are acting like a criminal, I said, my voice vibrating with suppressed rage. You forged a legal contract and hired a team of corporate mercenaries to trap me in your own home. Before she could respond, a door down the hallway clicked open. Footsteps echoed on the hardwood. Mom, you can come in now, Chloe called out, her voice shifting back to that of a helpless victim. I froze. Wait, what? My mother stepped into the dining room. She had her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her expression pulled into a mask of profound disappointment. It wasn't anger. It was that specific, crushing look of maternal disapproval that is designed to hit you like a physical punch to the gut, even when you're a grown 36-year-old man. Arthur, she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. This isn't how your father and I raised you. My mouth opened, but the betrayal stole my words. You promised to support your sister. Mom went on, laying the guilt on thick. We all did. Your father and I have completely drained our savings. We've maxed out our credit cards and pulled money from our retirement funds. Chloe has done everything she can to make this day beautiful. And now you're trying to back out over money? Just sign the paper, Arthur. I never promised her 55 grand, Mom. I pleaded, trying to maintain my sanity in a room entirely devoid of it. That was never the deal. Look at what she's doing. She ambushed me. Mom shook her head slowly, refusing to look at the lawyers. You make more money than your father and I combined. This isn't going to ruin your life. Please, Arthur, just sign it. Let's not turn this family into a scandal. So that's what this is? I asked, the realization crashing over me like ice water. It's just about saving face for the neighbors? Silence fell over the room. No one moved. Then Chloe, seeing that the emotional manipulation wasn't breaking me, dropped the final hammer. She leaned across the table, her eyes dead and venomous, and whispered, Sign it, Arthur, or I'll ruin you. My eyes narrowed. Excuse me? She didn't blink. I know things, Arthur. Did you really think I wouldn't do a little digging? I know about your real estate holdings. I know about the offshore trusts. I know about the LLCs you've been using to hide your actual net worth. My stomach dropped, not from fear, but from the sheer, psychotic depths she had sunk to. You've been hiding behind that humble, working-class guy act for years, she sneered, smiling like a cat holding a dead bird. But I made calls. I hired an investigator. You've got enough skeletons in your financial closet to bury you. If you don't fund my wedding, I will go public. I will tell the IRS. I will tell the family. I will blast it all over social media that you've been hoarding wealth while letting your own parents go into debt. There it was. It wasn't a request. It wasn't a negotiation. It was full-blown, undeniable blackmail. I stood entirely still for a long, agonizing moment. The silence in the apartment was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator. My heart was pounding fiercely against my ribs, but it wasn't from fear. It was from fury, a deep, cold, hyper-controlled fury that I hadn't felt in years. Chloe sat back in her chair, swirling her wine, looking incredibly smug. She thought she had me checkmated. She thought I was just the quiet, submissive older brother who would eventually fold under the crushing weight of family expectations and aggressive legal threats. I took a deep, slow breath, letting the cold logic of my profession take the wheel. Okay, I said quietly. Chloe blinked, her smug smile widening. Okay, what? You'll sign. I didn't look at the contract. I reached into the breast pocket of my jacket, pulled out my smartphone, and began dialing. I'm making a phone call, I stated calmly, my voice devoid of any emotion. Chloe laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. What? Are you calling your own lawyer to fight back? Arthur, don't be stupid. My team is already here. No, I replied, staring dead into her eyes. I'm calling my wife. For the first time all evening, the supreme confidence vanished from Chloe's face, replaced by total, unadulterated confusion. Your wife. Even my mother gasped, taking a step forward. Arthur? What are you talking about? I didn't answer. I just looked at the front door. She's actually been waiting in the hallway for my signal. I walked over, grasped the brass handle, and pulled the door open. Standing there in the dim light of the corridor, looking like an absolute force of nature, was Eleanor. Eleanor and I had met 4 years ago during a brutal corporate audit. She is a senior forensic accountant for one of the most ruthless financial investigative firms in the country. We bonded over spreadsheets, a shared disdain for corporate greed, and a mutual love for absolute privacy. When we got married at a quiet courthouse 3 years ago, we deliberately chose not to tell my family. It wasn't born out of shame or secrecy. It was pure tactical strategy. I knew exactly how my family operated, especially Chloe. The less they knew about my life, the less ammunition they had to exploit me. Eleanor had completely agreed. Now Eleanor stepped into the apartment. She was wearing a sharp, dark navy power suit that screamed federal-level authority. Her hair was pulled back into a severe, immaculate bun. Under one arm, she carried a thick, black leather portfolio. She didn't look at my mother. She didn't look at the bewildered lawyers. She locked her piercing gray eyes directly onto Chloe. Eleanor gave my sister a single, curt nod and said, "Let's talk options. Have you ever watched someone's reality shatter in real time? It's like watching a painting slowly detach from a wall. By the time they realize it's falling, it's already crashing into pieces on the floor." That was Chloe. Her arrogant smirk was wiped off her face so fast it looked like it had been physically violently yanked away by an invisible hook. She took an unsteady step backward, her knuckles turning white around her wine glass, blinking rapidly as if trying to wake up from a sudden nightmare. Eleanor stepped fully into the dining room. She was as calm, precise, and surgical as a doctor walking into an operating theater. Eleanor doesn't scream. She doesn't throw tantrums. She documents, she calculates, and she destroys with absolute precision. My mother, still frozen near the kitchen, clutched her chest, her eyes wide with shock. You're married to Arthur?" she stammered. Eleanor paused, turning her head slightly. "For 3 years, ma'am. 3 years." Mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth like she had just witnessed a murder. "You never told us." I let the front door swing shut with a heavy, final click. "And based on the fact that I am currently being ambushed and blackmailed in my sister's dining room, do you honestly think I should have?" I shot back. Chloe finally found her voice, though it was shrill and cracking. She pointed a manicured finger at Eleanor. "What is she doing here? This is a private family matter." Eleanor completely ignored Chloe. Instead, she marched straight to the dining table, dropping her heavy leather portfolio onto the wood with a loud thud. She addressed the 3 men in suits. "Which one of you prepared this fraudulent document?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the room like a steel blade. Harrison, the lead attorney, cleared his throat, trying to regain his professional composure. "That would be me, ma'am, but I must protest." "Good," Eleanor interrupted flawlessly, flipping open her portfolio and extracting a sheaf of densely printed papers. "Because I would love to know exactly which legal jurisdiction in the United States you believe allows a binding financial contract to be formed without a formal offer, without acceptance, without any exchange of consideration, without specific terms, and notarized solely off a vague, undated email." Harrison bristled, his face flushing red. "Ma'am, this is not a formal courtroom. We are simply here to mediate a familial dispute." "No, Mr. Vance," Eleanor snapped, leaning over the table, her eyes blazing. "You are here under strictly false pretenses to actively pressure my husband into surrendering a massive sum of money under the direct threat of reputational damage and financial exposure. That is the literal definition of coercion. A civil court judge would eat you alive, and the ethics board would revoke your license before lunch. But you already knew that, didn't you? You're just banking on him folding out of fear." Chloe's face was flushed crimson. Her eyes darted frantically between Eleanor's terrifying composure and my cold silence. She was trying to recalculate a math equation that had suddenly introduced entirely too many variables. Arthur, Chloe shrieked, turning her wrath on me. Why would you bring a stranger into this? This is between us. Eleanor turned to her, slow and deliberate, utterly devoid of emotion. Because you explicitly tried to threaten my husband with malicious lies, forged documents, and implied blackmail. That automatically makes it my problem. Yes. Oh, I absolutely love this. The secret forensic accountant wife is dismantling this entire circus. I am so here for this energy. How satisfying is this setup right now? You can't just barge into my apartment, Chloe yelled, her voice trembling with rising panic. Eleanor simply held up one hand. Not aggressively, not in anger, but with a simple, hyper-precise gesture of absolute dominance. Enough! The room fell dead silent. Even the lawyers stopped breathing. You told Arthur you would ruin him, Eleanor said quietly, her voice echoing in the quiet room. How exactly? Chloe swallowed hard, taking another step back. I was bluffing. It was just a scare tactic to get him to listen. That is not what you said 5 minutes ago, Eleanor countered smoothly. She pulled a freshly printed packet from her folder and slid it directly in front of Harrison. Here is a highly redacted summary of Arthur's actual financial structures. Note the ironclad asset protection clauses. Note the irrevocable trusts. Note the offshore corporate shields that make your pathetic little promissory estoppel lawsuit entirely inadvisable and legally laughable. Harrison picked up the packet. I could see his fingers physically trembling as his eyes scanned the complex financial architecture. He realized instantly that he was completely outgunned. Eleanor looked back at Chloe, her expression filled with cold pity. This was your absolute last shot at manipulating him, Chloe. You really should have spent it better. Chloe's eyes welled up with tears. For a brief, microscopic second, I thought the gravity of her actions had finally hit her. I thought she might break down and apologize. Instead, her face twisted into a mask of pure, ugly resentment. She turned her venom on me. You lied to me, she spat, tears of rage finally spilling over. You let me humiliate myself. You let me think I could count on you. And now you're parading your secret corporate wife in here just to have some sick gotcha moment. I stared at her, feeling a strange, heavy twist in my chest. It wasn't anger anymore. It was profound grief. Grief for the illusion of a family I had clung to for 36 years. Grief for the big brother I had exhausted myself trying to be. You never tried to count on me, Chloe, I said softly, my voice breaking the tension in the room. You only ever tried to use me, and the very first time I said no, you didn't ask why. You didn't talk to me. You hired lawyers. You forged papers. You weaponized our own mother against me. I was desperate, she screamed, her voice echoing off the walls. I deserve a beautiful wedding. You deserve respect, I replied, my tone icy and final. But you lost mine a very long time ago. I turned my gaze to my mother, who was silently weeping by the kitchen door. And you let this happen. You backed her extortion. You watched her steal my Mustang and forced me to pay for it. You didn't even ask me for my side of the story today. You just assumed my only purpose on this earth was to be a resource for her. My mom opened her mouth, reaching a hand out toward me, but no words came. I think she finally truly realized that the fundamental dynamic of our family, the unspoken golden rule of Chloe first, wasn't just cracking. It was completely obliterated. I turned my back on them, took Eleanor's hand, and walked toward the door. You're going to regret this, Arthur, Chloe shrieked from the dining room, her voice tearing at the seams. I swear to God, I will make you regret this. Eleanor paused in the doorway, glanced over her sharp shoulder, and delivered the final blow. You should really stop making verbal threats, Chloe. We record everything. We walked out into the cool night air, leaving the wreckage behind. But the war wasn't over. Chloe doubled down. The next morning, at exactly 10 a.m., my phone began vibrating off the kitchen counter. Calls from my aunt, a distant cousin, old high school friends. Eleanor checked her iPad, her face tightening. She posted it. I opened Facebook. Chloe had written a massive, carefully orchestrated essay. She played the ultimate victim, claiming she was emotionally devastated because her own brother had cruelly withdrawn his promised financial support mere weeks before her wedding. She painted me as a greedy, heartless monster who backed out of a sacred promise. She didn't mention the lawyers. She didn't mention the forged contract. She definitely didn't mention the blackmail or Eleanor. And the absolute worst part? My mother had commented right at the top. My beautiful girl deserves the world. We've got your back. You don't deserve this. That was it. The public stamp of approval on a smear campaign. I didn't argue online. I didn't defend myself to the digital mob. I simply drove my truck over to my parents' house one last time to look my father in the eye. When Dad opened the door, he looked exhausted, avoiding my gaze. We sat in the living room, surrounded by dozens of framed photos of Chloe. None of me. Why did you stand by her? I asked, my voice hollow. After everything I've quietly done for this family. He sighed, leaning back in his recliner. Because you don't need us, Arthur. You never have. You built your own life. Chloe. She needs us. She's fragile. When she falls apart, she shatters. We just pick up the pieces. So you enable her manipulation, I said, standing up. He didn't deny it. I didn't come here to beg for your love, Dad, I said, looking around the room one last time. I came here to say goodbye. I walked out of that house, got into my truck, and drove away. I was finally free. And as Eleanor and I began building our legal fortress to permanently sever my assets from their reach, I knew one thing for certain. Chloe had started a fire she couldn't control, and I was going to let her burn in it. The fallout of a family implosion rarely happens in one massive, cinematic explosion. It happens in the quiet, creeping aftershocks that travel through the foundation of everything you once thought was stable. After I walked out of my parents' house for the last time, the silence that followed was deafening. Eleanor and I didn't take to the internet to clear my name. We didn't post passive-aggressive quotes or record videos defending my honor against the digital mob Chloe had incited. When you are standing on the solid ground of the truth, you don't need to shout to prove you aren't sinking. Instead, we spent the next few weeks working with surgical precision to completely sever any remaining ties I had to my family's financial ecosystem. I liquidated the shared accounts I had set up years ago to help my parents with their property taxes. I moved every single asset, every investment portfolio, and every piece of real estate into heavily fortified LLCs and blind trusts. Eleanor worked late into the night, setting up legal firewalls that made my net worth entirely invisible to anyone without a federal subpoena. We built a fortress around our life. When Chloe's wedding day finally arrived, I was sitting on the back porch of the cabin Eleanor and I had just bought in Colorado, drinking a cheap beer and watching the sun dip behind the mountains. We didn't attend the wedding, obviously, but a few days later, I saw the photos online. The guest list was packed with the exact kind of people who treat a wedding like a networking event. Fringe influencers, minor local politicians, and guys wearing suits that cost more than my first truck. I scrolled through the heavily edited albums, and I noticed one glaring detail right away. I was completely erased. There was no mention of me. No empty chair left in my honor. No sad caption about a missing brother. Nothing. Chloe had scrubbed my existence from the narrative entirely. I knew exactly what that meant. She was actively covering her tracks. Her entire story, the tragic tale that her wealthy, cruel brother had bailed at the last second and left her heartbroken, relied heavily on me not being there to contradict it. If there had been even a whisper of my name, people might have started asking questions she didn't want to answer. So, she pretended I never existed. Honestly, felt incredibly fair. Because as far as I was concerned, she didn't exist to me anymore either. The anger had finally burned itself out, leaving behind a cold, hard resolve. I stopped bleeding for people who only loved me when I was holding a checkbook. We built our lives quietly and peacefully, but that didn't mean I forgot the threat she made. It just meant I was willing to wait. 6 months passed. The noise died down, The angry texts from distant relatives ceased, and the dust of the family fracture finally settled. I threw myself into my work, funding startups that actually produced value for the working class, while Eleanor's forensic consulting firm took off. We were thriving in the shadows. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, my phone buzzed with an incoming email. The subject line read, "Urgent. Please read. It's about Chloe." The sender was Derek, Chloe's husband. I stared at the name on my screen for a long time. Derek and I had barely spoken during the entire time he dated my sister. He had always seemed like a guy who mistook a high credit limit for a personality. Someone perfectly content to be an accessory in Chloe's Instagram life. The message was short, frantic, and devoid of any pride. "Arthur, I know I am the absolute last person you want to hear from. I know there is bad blood. But Chloe has gotten us into something massive. I think I'm going to prison. Please, man to man, can we meet? I have no one else to ask." I didn't reply right away. I forwarded the email to Eleanor, who was in her downtown office. 3 minutes later, she called me. "She's slipping," Eleanor said, her voice calm and analytical. "She ran out of other people's money faster than I anticipated." "Do I meet him?" I asked, staring out the window at the rain. "Yes," Eleanor replied without hesitation. "Let's see the body count." I agreed to meet Derek at a dismal, fluorescent-lit diner on the edge of the city, far away from the upscale neighborhoods he usually frequented. When I walked in, I barely recognized him. The tailored suit was gone, replaced by a wrinkled flannel shirt. His hair was a mess. He had dark, bruised-looking bags under his eyes, and his hands were shaking as he gripped a mug of black coffee. I slid into the booth across from him, not offering my hand. "Talk," I said flatly. Derek swallowed hard, looking like a man standing on the gallows. He started unraveling the nightmare. Shortly after their lavish wedding, Chloe decided to parlay her experience into a business. She launched a luxury event planning company, leveraging the success of her own wedding, the one she had successfully pretended she paid for, to target brides with six-figure budgets. She hired a PR firm, bought fake followers, rented a ridiculous downtown office just for content creation. Derek explained, his voice cracking. She made all these massive promises to high-end clients. But she didn't know what she was doing, Arthur. She didn't pay the vendors. She took the deposits, huge ones, and spent them on herself. She bought a new Mercedes. She bought designer clothes to look the part. "How much?" I asked, cutting to the chase. Derek looked down at his shaking hands. $68,000. From 4 different brides. I let out a slow, heavy breath. "And where is she now?" "Gone," Derek whispered, looking up at me with absolute terror in his eyes. "She packed a bag 3 days ago and vanished. Her phone is disconnected. She drained our joint checking account. And Arthur, she put my name on the LLC documents. She forged my signature on the vendor contracts. The clients are coming after me. The police have already knocked on my door." Derek sat there, a broken shell of a man, waiting for me to pull out a checkbook and make his problems disappear. He thought, like the rest of my family, that my quiet nature was synonymous with weakness. He thought because I had money, I would feel an obligation to throw it at the fire to keep the family name out of the local news. "I know you hate us," Derek pleaded, leaning across the sticky diner table. "I know she treated you like garbage. But please, Arthur, I can't go to federal prison for wire fraud. I didn't do this. You have the money. If you just loan me the 68 grand, I can pay the brides back and the cops will drop the investigation. I'll pay you back with interest, I swear to God." "Are you kidding me, Derek? You stood by while she forged contracts and blackmailed your brother-in-law, and now you want him to bail you out? The audacity of this man is just staggering. What advice would you give Derek right now?" I looked at him, feeling a profound sense of disgust, not just for Chloe, but for him. "I'm not bailing you out, Derek," I said, my voice as hard as granite. His face crumbled. "Arthur, please." "You watched her lie?" I interrupted, leaning forward, refusing to break eye contact. You watched her forge a legal contract to extort me. You watched her manipulate my mother, destroy my grandfather's car, and smear my name across the internet to thousands of people. You knew exactly who she was. You saw the monster and you decided to marry it because the monster looked good in pictures. You don't get to act like a victim now. Derek shrank back into the vinyl booth, utterly defeated. So you're just going to let me go to jail? No, I said, reaching into my leather briefcase. I'm going to give you something significantly more valuable than my money. I pulled out a thick, heavy manila folder and dropped it onto the table with a loud smack. Derek stared at it like it was a live grenade. What is this? Everything, I replied coldly. My wife is a forensic accountant. When Chloe threatened to ruin me, Eleanor started digging into Chloe's financial footprint. This folder contains a complete paper trail. It has the IP logs showing exactly where those forged contracts were digitally signed. It has the routing numbers for the offshore accounts she's been using to squirrel away the stolen deposits. It has proof that your signature was electronically manipulated by her devices. Derek opened the folder with trembling fingers. His eyes went wide as he flipped through the meticulously organized pages of bank records, digital timestamps, and LLC registrations. She left a massive, sloppy trail of breadcrumbs when she tried to disappear. I explained, standing up from the booth. You just didn't know where to look. Take this to your lawyer. Take it to the police. You can prove she committed fraud. You can clear your own name. Why? Derek asked, looking up at me in disbelief. Why are you helping me after everything? I looked down at him, adjusting the cuffs of my jacket. I'm not helping you, Derek. I'm stopping her. I don't want her life ruined. I just want it honest. With that, I turned and walked out of the diner, leaving him staring at the blueprint of his wife's destruction. For the next few months, I watched from a comfortable distance as the dominoes began to fall. Armed with Eleanor's forensic dossier, Derek filed for divorce, handed the evidence over to the state authorities, and fully cooperated with the fraud investigation. To avoid an immediate arrest, Chloe went completely underground. She abandoned her luxury apartment, ditched the leased Mercedes, and effectively became a ghost. But Eleanor and I knew human nature. Specifically, we knew Chloe's nature. She was arrogant, highly delusional, and addicted to the illusion of a glamorous lifestyle. People like my sister don't experience rock bottom and suddenly decide to work a humble, 9-to-5 job to pay off their debts. They double down. They rebrand. They seek out new victims who don't know their history. I didn't have to chase her. I just had to wait for her ego to force her out of hiding. Took 8 months. One evening, Eleanor was sitting on the sofa, scrolling through a specialized database of newly registered businesses in the hospitality sector. She stopped, tapped her screen a few times, and let out a low, satisfied hum. Found her, Eleanor said, turning the tablet toward me. I looked at the screen. It was a brand new website for a company called Chloe Sterling Events. She had dropped our family's last name entirely, adopting her middle name to throw off any casual Google searches. The website was a masterpiece of grifting. It featured stock photos of opulent weddings, glowing fake testimonials, and a beautifully written About Me section that claimed she was a highly sought-after boutique planner relocating from the East Coast to bring unmatched elegance to the Midwest. She had registered the LLC in Wyoming, a state famous for allowing anonymous corporate ownership, and set up a virtual office address. It was clever, but it wasn't bulletproof. She's targeting a new demographic, Eleanor noted, zooming in on the pricing packages. High net worth brides in neighboring states. She's charging a 25% non-refundable retainer upfront. She needs the cash flow to pay off the lawyers from Derek's lawsuit. I reasoned, feeling the familiar, cold grip of strategy taking over. If we go to the police now, she'll just slip away again. She's too small time right now for the feds to prioritize. So what's the play? Eleanor asked, a dangerous smile playing on her lips. We let her climb, I said. We let her build the scaffolding. We let her stand on the very top of it in front of an audience. And then we kicked the legs out. We monitored her digital footprint for weeks. We watched as she slowly built her illusion back up. We saw her secure 2 new, wealthy clients. We watched her post photos of venue walkthroughs, pretending she was back on top of the world. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt the detached, methodical patience of a hunter. Then, she made the single greatest mistake of her life. She applied for a premium booth at the most exclusive, high-end bridal expo in the region. It was a massive event, heavily covered by local media and attended by the wealthiest families in the state. What Chloe didn't know, what she couldn't have possibly known, was that the historic, vaulted-ceiling building hosting the expo was owned by a commercial real estate holding company. A holding company that I owned a controlling 40% stake in through 3 layers of corporate shielding. The prey had just voluntarily walked directly into my cage. The setup required absolute precision. I had a contact on the expo's vendor approval board, a guy whose failing business I had quietly saved from bankruptcy 2 years prior. I made one phone call. I didn't ask him to reject Chloe's application. I asked him to approve it immediately, waive the entry fee, and place her booth in the absolute dead center of the main exhibition hall, right where the foot traffic and the lighting would be the most intense. I wanted her on the biggest stage possible. But Eleanor and I weren't going to show up. Confronting her myself would give her the opportunity to spin the narrative, to play the victim, to scream that her abusive brother was stalking and harassing her. No, the executioner couldn't be me. It had to be someone whose grievance was undeniable. Eleanor tracked down Sarah. Sarah was a 26-year-old nurse. She was one of the 4 brides Chloe had scammed out of her deposit the previous year. Sarah had lost $10,000. Money she and her fiancé had spent 2 grueling years saving by working double shifts at the hospital. When Chloe vanished, Sarah had to cancel her dream venue and get married in a local park. She was devastated, angry, and seeking justice. Eleanor contacted Sarah privately, explaining who we were and what we had found. We reimbursed Sarah her stolen $10,000 out of our own pocket, no strings attached. But we asked her if she wanted something more than just her money back. We asked if she wanted to ensure Chloe never did this to another bride ever again. Sarah didn't hesitate for a second. The morning of the bridal expo, the venue looked spectacular. Thousands of fairy lights draped across the ceiling, champagne flowed freely, and a string quartet played softly in the background. It was a paradise of tulle, frosting, and absurdly expensive floral arrangements. In the center of it all was Chloe. She was in her element. She wore a pristine, tailored white power suit, her hair perfectly styled in loose waves. She stood behind a booth adorned with gold lettering that read Chloe Sterling Events, handing out glossy brochures and charming prospective brides with the effortless, sociopathic grace she had honed since childhood. Eleanor and I watched a live feed from a camera positioned discreetly near the ceiling. At 1:30 p.m., right at the peak of the crowd's density, Sarah walked through the main doors. We had provided her with a VIP all-access pass. Accompanying Sarah was a friend holding a DSLR camera on a stabilizer gimbal, looking exactly like a typical wedding videographer capturing B-roll footage. Clipped to the lapel of Sarah's blouse was a high-definition, wireless microphone. Sarah navigated through the sea of prospective brides, her eyes locked onto the glowing gold sign in the center of the room. She didn't look angry. She didn't look unhinged. She looked perfectly, terrifyingly calm. From our vantage point, Eleanor and I watched the screen as Sarah approached the booth. Chloe was mid-sentence, laughing flawlessly at a joke made by a wealthy-looking older woman, likely the mother of a bride, when she noticed Sarah standing there. For a fraction of a second, the polished mask slipped. Chloe's eyes widened, a flash of pure, unadulterated panic crossing her face before she forcibly rearranged her features back into a polite, professional smile. "Hi there," Chloe said, her voice a little too loud, a little too strained. "Can I help you?" Sarah smiled warmly, stepping right up to the edge of the table. The cameraman stood a few feet back, the lens pointed directly at Chloe's face. "Hi," Sarah said, her voice projecting clearly, picked up flawlessly by the hidden mic. "I'm Sarah. I think we worked together last year." Several women standing nearby paused, turning their heads, drawn in by the sudden shift in the atmosphere. Chloe swallowed hard. "Oh, right, Sarah. So good to see you again. I'm actually in the middle of a consultation right now, but if you want to leave your card, I was just wondering whatever happened to your old company." Sarah interrupted, her tone perfectly pleasant, as if she were asking about the weather. "The one on the invoice you gave me. Elegance Events, I think it was." Chloe stiffened. The mother of the bride standing next to her frowned, looking back and forth between them. "I rebranded," Chloe said quickly, waving her hand dismissively. "Just taking the business in a new, more exclusive direction." Sarah tilted her head, maintaining eye contact. "A new direction. That's great. And the deposits you collected? The $10,000 my fiancé and I paid you right before you disconnected your phone and vanished? Did those deposits rebrand too?" The silence that fell over that immediate circle was absolute. The string quartet playing 50 feet away suddenly sounded incredibly loud. Chloe's face drained of all color. She looked at the cameraman, then at the growing crowd of onlookers. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm sorry, you need to leave my booth." "Security. I have the police report right here," Sarah continued, her voice never raising above a calm, conversational volume. She pulled a folded legal document from her purse and laid it gently on the pristine white tablecloth. "Along with the lawsuit filed by your ex-husband for forging his signature to steal client funds. I was just curious if you were offering the same vanishing package to these lovely ladies today." Chloe backed up a step, knocking over a crystal vase of white roses. Water spilled across the table, ruining her glossy brochures. She looked like a cornered animal. She didn't try to defend herself. She didn't try to spin a lie. The presence of the camera, the document, and the absolute certainty in Sarah's voice shattered her entirely. Without a word, Chloe turned on her heel and practically sprinted away from the booth, pushing past a group of startled attendees and disappearing behind a heavy velvet curtain leading to the service exit. Sarah didn't chase her. She didn't need to. She just stood there, looked at the shocked women standing around the abandoned booth, and said, "I highly recommend you don't sign anything with her." The collapse was absolute. The video of the confrontation didn't feature screaming or physical violence, which is exactly why it was so devastating. It was clean, undeniable, and utterly damning. We didn't post it from our own accounts. We forwarded the raw footage to 3 major bridal industry watchdog blogs and a prominent consumer rights advocate on TikTok who specializes in exposing wedding industry scams. Within 48 hours, the video hit 3 million views. There was no PR spin that could save her. The internet, armed with the LLC registrations, the police reports, and the video evidence, went to work. The outrage was visceral. People hate thieves, but they absolutely despise people who steal from working-class couples to fund a fake luxury lifestyle. The fallout was a masterclass in total destruction. The Venue Association permanently blacklisted Chloe's name, her new alias, and her social security number from ever renting commercial event space in the state again. A prestigious California bridal magazine, which had previously featured a glowing puff piece about her rise in the industry, issued a quiet, highly damaging retraction stating they were severing all ties with her due to ongoing criminal investigations. Her 2 new clients immediately canceled their contracts and demanded chargebacks on their credit cards. But the internet was only the beginning. The law finally caught up. Because of the viral attention, the district attorney could no longer ignore the pile of small claims lawsuits and fraud reports sitting on their desk. Chloe was officially served with a civil suit for multiple counts of fraud, breach of contract, and intentional misrepresentation. To avoid serving jail time, she was forced into a brutal settlement. She had to liquidate everything. The designer bags, the jewelry, the purebred dog she bought for Instagram. Everything was sold off to pay restitution to the brides she had robbed. And then the final, pathetic consequence arrived. Completely bankrupt, legally radioactive, and possessing no actual marketable skills, Chloe had absolutely nowhere else to go. She moved back into the unfinished basement of my parents' house. My parents, who had already drained their retirement accounts to pay for her extravagant wedding, were forced to take out a massive second mortgage on their home to cover her legal fees and keep their little star out of a federal penitentiary. The financial strain broke them. The golden child had finally burned the castle to the ground. I heard about it all through the grapevine, from an old high school buddy who still lived in the neighborhood. I listened to him recount the town gossip over the phone, and when he finished, I didn't feel a surge of triumphant joy. I didn't cheer. I just felt an overwhelming sense of profound, quiet justice. The scales had finally balanced. The last time I ever laid eyes on my sister was nearly a year later. I had flown back to my hometown to sign the final paperwork on the sale of a commercial property. I stopped at a rundown, discount grocery store on the edge of town to grab a bottle of water before heading to the airport. I turned down the fluorescent-lit aisle, and there she was, Chloe. She was alone. She was wearing an oversized, faded hoodie and sweatpants. Her hair was pulled into a messy knot, and there was no makeup to hide the deep, exhausted lines on her face. She was standing at the register, arguing frantically with the teenage cashier because her debit card had just been declined for a basket of cheap groceries. Her voice wasn't powerful or arrogant anymore. It was thin, desperate, and reeked of defeat. I stood at the end of the aisle for a few seconds, just watching her. In that moment, I searched myself for any lingering trace of pity, or perhaps a spark of vindictive joy. I found neither. I just felt completely, unequivocally done. She turned her head, and for one brief, agonizing second, our eyes met across the store. Her expression shifted rapidly. Shock, then a deep, suffocating shame. She opened her mouth, perhaps to ask for help, perhaps to apologize, but no words came out. I didn't smile. I didn't sneer. I just gave her a single, slow nod of acknowledgement. Then, I turned my back, walked out the sliding glass doors, and left her standing there in the life she had built for herself. Bloody hell. What an absolute journey. The golden child finally hit rock bottom and he just walked away. That is pure karma. I am getting absolute chills. Did she deserve even a single word from him? A few weeks later, a handwritten letter arrived at my corporate office. There was no return address, but I recognized the elegant, cursive handwriting immediately. It was from my mother. I sat at my desk and opened it. It was only 2 sentences long. I'm sorry. I never realized how much you carried for all of us until it was gone. I hope you're happy, Mom. There was no mention of Chloe, no begging for money, no emotional manipulation asking to reconnect. It was just a stark, heavy admission of truth from a woman living in the ruins of her own favoritism. I folded the paper carefully, placed it into the bottom drawer of my desk, and shut it. I didn't write back. Some apologies don't require forgiveness. They just require acknowledgement. That night, I sat on the wooden deck of our Colorado home. The air was crisp, smelling of pine and impending snow. Eleanor walked out holding 2 mugs of coffee, handing one to me before leaning her head against my shoulder. We looked out at the vast, silent expanse of the mountains. Do you ever miss them? Eleanor asked softly, her voice carrying in the quiet night. I took a sip of the dark coffee, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. I thought about the rusted Mustang, the forged contracts, the lies, and the final look on Chloe's face in that grocery store. No, I said, my voice steady and certain. I don't. Eleanor looked up at me, the moonlight catching her eyes. Are you at peace with it, Arthur? I wrapped my arm around my wife, the woman who had stood beside me and helped me burn the rot out of my life. I looked out at the horizon, feeling the absolute, unbreakable strength of a man who had survived the fire and built his own kingdom from the ashes. They taught me everything I needed to know about loyalty, I said quietly into the night, by breaking it, and with that I finally let the past go forever. What an absolutely wild ride. I am entirely on Arthur's side. The fact that his parents spent 36 years treating him like a walking ATM while treating Chloe like a princess is sickening. Chloe is an absolute sociopath, plain and simple. She didn't just want a wedding. She wanted to destroy her brother to fund her delusions. And the parents? They are the real villains here for enabling this monster. Letting them go bankrupt was the only way they would ever learn. Arthur and Eleanor are legends for how they handled that. The patience it takes to wait for the perfect moment to drop the hammer is just incredible. User Not Your ATM says, Arthur, you are a saint. I would have pressed charges the moment she crashed the Mustang. You are so right about that, Not Your ATM. I would have had the police at that driveway so fast her head would spin. But you have to admit, letting her build her own trap and watching it fall apart at that bridal expo was so much sweeter. User Golden Child Survivor says, this hits too close to home. The mom's letter at the end was just a pity party. She only apologized because she ran out of money. You hit the nail on the head right there. That was not a real apology. She was just mourning the loss of her safety net. Do you guys think Arthur should have ever replied to that letter? Because I think silence was the loudest message he could send. User Wedding Planner Drama writes, I feel bad for the scam brides, but Derek deserved everything he got. He knew she was a snake, right? Derek is not a victim here. He wanted the flashy lifestyle without asking any questions, and he got burned. I am just glad Eleanor had the receipts to save the innocent people in all this.